Ukraine has so far received strike weapons of varying ranges from the US, such as ATACMS, JDAM-ER, SDB, and Storm Shadow/Scalp from other allies. Each of these munitions has filled a specific gap on the battlefield. Now, the extended-range attack munition ERAM is emerging as a contender to top this list. The U.S. Department of State announced on August 28th that it had approved a military sale of extended-range attack munition, ERAM, missiles and related equipment to Ukraine, with an estimated value of $825 million. The first deliveries are expected to begin within weeks. The announcement of the sale comes after diplomatic efforts to end the war have yet to bear fruit, and following Russia's deadly attacks on Ukraine's capital. The arrival of this new munition means Ukraine has the opportunity to increase its deep strike capability in terms of both numerical capacity and range. These missiles, with a range of up to 450 kilometers, have put the Kremlin on alert. The previous arsenal relied on deep strike weapons that numbered only a few dozen or a few hundred. With ERAM, depth will now be defined not only by range, but also by quantity and sustainability. Ukrainian Presidential Chief of Staff Andriy Yermak confirmed the deal in a statement on his social media account, saying, "Up to 3,350 ERAM missiles and 3,350 anti-counterfeit navigation modules will be supplied." A statement from the U.S. State Department said, "Ukraine will use funds provided by Denmark, the Netherlands, and Norway, as well as foreign military financing from the United States for this purchase." ERAM is an example of working with our NATO allies to develop a capable and scalable system that can be delivered quickly. The delivery window is set at 6 weeks, and shipments are expected to flow in a piecemeal but rapid rhythm. This scale provides a minimum buffer for the Ukrainian Air Force to plan regular standoff strikes for the remainder of the year. These missiles combine the standoff gap with mass scale as a relatively low-cost, rapidly producible long-range strike munition launched from air platforms. ERAM's range band is roughly 241 to 450 kilometers, with a 500-pound class warhead, GPS navigation operating in a jammed environment, and a declared circular error probability of less than 10 meters. These values show that ERAM, while not reaching the accuracy level of expensive cruise missiles, meets the operational requirement for sufficient accuracy. The choice of a fragmentation warhead type for ERAM, with a specific armor-piercing capability, suggests it is suitable for targets such as ammunition depots, fuel tanks, radars, command centers, and runway targets in Russia. The speed parameter is not classically supersonic, but combined with the profile selection and attack geometry, this missile can leave a difficult trail for air defenses. The low cost and high logic of ERAM shipments require a focus on the total effect within the wave rather than on individual munitions. Therefore, ERAM's design philosophy relies on cost-effective adequacy and mass numbers rather than perfection per unit. The GPS-resistant navigation package aims to maintain minimum performance against Russian electronic warfare intensities. In the terminal phase, terminal accuracy provides the desired effect on medium-hardness fixed targets such as command and control buildings. ERAM's long-range band may allow the launching aircraft to remain outside the range of S-300 and S-400 systems. This whole package enhances survivability as much as range and quantity. The platform issue for ERAM appears critical and multifaceted for Ukraine. We have previously seen MiG-29s and Su-27s integrated with special suspension arms and tablet-based interfaces to carry Western munitions. Su-24s have served as carriers for Storm Shadow/Scalp missions and are also emerging as compatible candidates for ERAM. The arrival of the F-16s provides a more reliable mission platform and a more flexible mission planning infrastructure for this munition. Mission planning, network compatibility, and maintenance spare parts flow are more standardized on the F-16. Regardless of the platform, the low-altitude profile and standoff launch scenarios increase survivability. Combined with network-centric targeting data, multiple launches from different lines on the same wave are possible. The flight profile and navigation quality can be selected to reduce radar exposure time. The appropriate tactic is to create a logical division of labor between targets allocated to expensive cruise missiles and the ERAM list. In this division of labor, ERAM is ideal for medium-hardness fixed targets and sensitive logistical nodes. The constraints will be administrative target approval and existing aircraft-type avionics integration schedules. Although there are other items in the same package, it appears that the number of ERAMs will make the real difference. The fact that the delivery schedule for ERAMs to Ukraine was announced after the summit meetings also shows that the political context is holding back the military aspect. Nevertheless, the critical detail is that the authorization to use the ammunition will be subject to the review procedure in Washington. This procedure introduces a target approval filter, particularly for ranges targeting deep inside Russia. When planning operations, this filter will serve as a second screen for target type and geography. Despite the short delivery window, the entire picture points to a controlled rollout. When we examine the background of this missile in more detail, we encounter surprising data. ERAM is based on a rapidly developed and mass-produced air-launched standoff program. The U.S. Air Force published an RFI in 2024, followed by an RFP, requesting proposals for low-cost, modular cruise munitions from different companies. The goal was to create a solution that could be mass-produced with sufficient range and accuracy in a cheaper body compared to classic cruise missiles. ERAM's value for Ukraine lies in its role as a volume weapon that serves as an alternative to expensive and rare munitions. Program documentation anticipated the rapid maturation of prototypes and the short-term supply of field-ready configurations. This approach translates to a supply model that keeps pace with the rhythm of war. At the same time, ERAM is creating a long-term lesson library for the U.S.'s own force structure. The ERAMs to be provided to Ukraine could become test data for the concept of inexpensive multiple munitions in the U.S. inventory. Therefore, the decision is not just an export, but a proof of concept tour. This framework helps explain why ERAM is referred to as the star of the war. ERAM's doctrine of use can be read as mass standoff suppression, where air defense and munitions economy come face to face. Russian integrated air defense systems are layered, but their thickness varies depending on geography and priorities. S-300/400 batteries are forced to allocate limited firepower to expensive targets. The reaction to glide bombs, however, leaves the door open to mass pressure. Russia's joint strike analyses show that the approach of thinning the layers and breaking the kill chain into pieces yields more rational results. Medium-cost but high-volume munitions such as ERAM can break the rule of one cruise missile per target. What matters is not the individual kill ratio, but the net damage remaining at the end of the wave. Therefore, ERAM is positioned in the same repertoire as Storm Shadow, Scalp, and ATACMS, but on a different line. Establishing depth with expensive missiles and breadth and frequency with ERAM presents a balanced picture. This picture pushes the saturation threshold of air defenses early. The effect of ERAM becomes clearer when the target set is specified. Railway junctions and ammunition depots along the Belgorod, Kursk, and Bryansk lines are threatened depending on the aircraft profile carried within a 241 to 450 kilometer band. Air-sea nodes such as Milarovo and Morozovsk in the Rostov region, and Yeysk and Primorsko-Akhtarsk on the Azov coast come under pressure. In Crimea, the Jankoy Logistics Junction, air bases such as Saki and Gvardeyskoy, and coastal fuel depots are added to the list of targets. Secondary logistics nodes in the Kerch Passage area are valuable targets in terms of support facilities outside the bridge. Russia's energy and fuel storage areas are high-impact cost options for the air-to-ground profile. Russian command and control buildings and factory-level repair facilities can be written into the second layer of wave plans. Not city centers, but the nerve centers of Russia's war economy become the natural target of this concept. This approach is rational in terms of both the laws of war and ammunition economics. The goal is to produce high-frequency pressure with low risk. Ukraine's previous deep strike campaigns had shown that Russian air defenses around Crimea could be gradually eroded. Long-range munitions and waves of UAVs launched against S-300/400 batteries particularly wore down radar and launcher combinations. In some months, air defense losses reached extraordinary levels, opening a window for subsequent air missions. Meanwhile, air bases and aircraft parking areas also came under regular pressure. The addition of ERAM increases the sustainability of this pressure. This is because the mix of expensive and limited missiles with cheap and abundant munitions complicates the question of what the defense should hold in which layer. When options multiply, Russian Defense Command is closer to making mistakes. Over time, every gap around Crimea becomes a gateway for another mission. Thus, it is not a single wave, but a series of waves that is discussed. As the Russian military system is disrupted by ERAMs, repair and spare parts shortages create a new vulnerability. In the northern sector, supply lines and railway junctions are key. Large storage areas and temporary ammunition depots around Belgorod are the first candidates to fall within ERAM range. Lines in the Kursk and Bryansk directions place a greater burden on land convoys when the air threat increases. This makes the Russian army's transport planning dependent on seasonal and road conditions. Temporary but frequent interruptions to railway lines disrupt the frontline rhythm. When fuel depots and locomotive maintenance areas are hit, convoy tempo slows. This scenario opens the door to attrition-focused operations on Ukraine's southern and eastern fronts. Even during periods of adverse weather, this standoff munitions creates planned pressure. When range and quantity combine, there is no margin of safety in logistics. This shortage causes Russian headquarters to act conservatively. On the other hand, the Russian air defense's response to ERAM hits technical and administrative limits. The number of S-300, 400S and firing stocks are prioritized according to geography, causing some sectors to be neglected. Thick layers can only be achieved 100% around the capital and strategic bases. On distant fronts, the error rate increases when the radar fire control chain is forced into a frequent attack cycle. The impact of electronic warfare and GPS jamming efforts will not be limited, but ERAM's design goal is sufficient accuracy under this pressure. As seen in CSIS and similar studies, the parties have begun to measure defense economics with mass munitions. In this economy, it is becoming increasingly difficult to save a target with a single shot. From Ukraine's perspective, the advantage of ERAM is that the wave cost can be lower than the defense cost. At that point, the result is not the individual interception percentage, but the net damage remaining at the end of the wave. Therefore, defense layers are also psychologically worn down. The administrative filter must also be taken into account. The Pentagon's high-level review mechanism limited the use of US-made ammunition deep inside Russia for months. It is emphasized that the pre-approval condition will also apply to the new era set. This arrangement places a safety valve between political goals and military requirements. Ukraine's planning must therefore proceed on two axes, namely, the target list on the ground and the Washington-based approval screen. On the other hand, Europe's financing role for ERAM serves to accelerate the flow of packages without bypassing the target approval chain. This structure aims to keep the escalation control in Washington's hands while also increasing volume for Ukraine. Therefore, the strategic significance of ERAM is defined not only in terms of range and numbers, but also in terms of the regime of use. As long as the restrictions remain in place, the target map will be closer to the borderlines and concentrated around Crimea. A significant portion of the results on the ground will also be achieved in these regions. Of course, it is also necessary to address the critical and irreversible consequences of ERAM procurement for Russia. The Russian side's long-range strike capability has evolved, but it is expensive and has certain limits in terms of monthly production tempo. When Russia's stock sizes and production figures are read together with consumption in the field, sustainability concerns become apparent. Ukraine's shift towards low-cost standoff weapons such as ERAM is a logical move to tip the balance in its favor. Keeping Russia's extensive air defense network constantly on alert with ERAM creates a significant resource burden for the Kremlin. The range number combination forces the Russian side to be constantly on watch in terms of electricity, radar, air imagery, and logistics. This watch reduces the attention and resources that can be allocated to other operational axes. For Ukraine, the plan appears to be to generate continuous pressure with frequent waves rather than chasing big moments with expensive single shots. This increases the likelihood of the air defense commander making a mistake. Once a mistake enters the chain, a second wave on the same day creates a much higher impact. The numerical scale of ERAM makes this second wave concept possible every day. The question of how adequate Russian air defense is against ERAM cannot be dismissed with a single answer. At low altitudes, the detection and engagement window narrows, and engagement selection in multiple waves increases the error rate. Electronic warfare can challenge the navigation package, but ERAM's design goal is to maintain sufficient accuracy under this pressure. A 10-meter CEP on fixed and large targets provides effective results for command buildings and fuel depots. The speed and RCS parameter pushes the S-300 400's fire control to favor valuable targets. This means the defense faces dilemmas in mixed waves of glide munitions and UAVs. When defense faces a dilemma, the second half of the wave finds an easier path. This cycle alters field behavior even when lasting only a few days. Radar and launcher mobility increases, creating another vulnerability. Moving systems become more predictable for planned attacks. Recalling Ukraine's previously used munitions set reveals where ERAM fills the gap. JDAM ER and SDB were effective in the 40 to 45-mile range, producing results through integration even before the F-16. Storm Shadow/Scalp created strategic impact on deep targets, albeit expensive and carefully selected. ATAC-Ms opened a clear window on the battlefield when it struck air defense batteries and runway targets. The common weakness of this trio was either quantity, cost, or administrative constraints. ERAM completes the picture as a middle ground solution across these three axes. The big picture is clear on the outcome front. ERAM offers Ukraine a cost-effective standoff instrument that adds depth and quantity. The approved quantity and short delivery window for these missiles means we could see regular waves on the field before the end of the year. Although the usage regime is subject to administrative filtering, pressure will increase in Crimea and along the borderlines. The Russian air defense's ability to cope with this tempo could exacerbate resource and planning problems. The electronic warfare effect will not disappear completely, but ERAM's design goals aim to maintain minimum accuracy under this pressure. The biggest difference for ERAM is that the shift from rare and expensive to abundant and sufficient creates rhythm. Rhythm simultaneously depletes the opponent's economy and morale. In this context, ERAM is more than an operational weapon for Ukraine. It is a strategic pressure tool against Russia. Thank you for watching.